Hello and welcome to the ILTV News Podcast. I'm Maayan Hoffman, Executive Editor of ILTV News, and we're so happy to welcome back our viewers and listeners. Now, we're in for a very special guest today with someone coming all the way from the United States. We have today Mitchell Silk. He is the former Assistant Secretary for International Markets at the U.S. Department of the Treasury. He served in the first administration of U.S. President Donald Trump. He's also the first Hasidic Jew to ever serve in a presidentially nominated and Senate-confirmed role. So here we go. Welcome.
Great to be here, Maayan. Thank you so much for having me.
Such a pleasure to have you. Now, you have been called a pioneer, as I mentioned, the first Hasidic Jew ever confirmed by the Senate. What went through your mind that first day that you walked into the Treasury?
It was a shocker. I took my breath away. I felt just the enormity of the earth upon me. What kept me grounded is the very simple kind of Yiddish learning that we have, rechte Fies, go in with your right foot first. Mm-hmm. And I just kept going step after step after that.
Wow, and you were there from 2017 to 2020. It's a long time. You also happen to be a very busy man outside of your work with 8 children, from what I understand, and 7 grandchildren, a large family. What lessons from parenting do you carry into the negotiating these billion-dollar deals that you worked out when you were in the White House? Small
steps, keep everybody moving along toward a big vision.
Yeah, wow. So now you're fluent in a number of languages, including one that is probably somewhat controversial today, given the United States' relationship with China, Mandarin and Cantonese. But I also read that your favorite language is not either of these, but in fact, Yiddish. Do you ever find yourself sort of slipping into Yiddish when you're in these meetings with very important people?
I work very hard to incorporate Yiddish into all of my work. I even got into a little bit of trouble with then Undersecretary David Malpass, who went on to lead the World Bank, when he wanted to name a particular initiative that I had formulated for infrastructure finance. And the name that they chose, because it was directed toward the Western Hemisphere, was America Crece. I'm not a Spanish speaker. I understand now that it means Americas grow.
Okay.
We were helping our partners grow throughout the Western Hemisphere and the Caribbean. And he stepped out of his office with a draft of the speech that he was going to use to launch the program with his senior counselor. And they had come up with this name that they really, really liked. His senior counselor was a native Spanish speaker. And they asked me how I felt about the name America Crece. And I said, well, gee, Mr. Undersecretary, why not America Vax, the Yiddish version? He thought I was serious, and he thought there might be an issue, and I never heard the end of it from a senior counselor.
Oh, really?
But I work hard to incorporate Yiddish into all of my meetings. I find that it brings a personal touch and a connection with every foreign minister, foreign counterpart that I've worked with.
Were your parents Yiddish speakers? Is that how you learned Yiddish?
It's interesting. My parents were first-generation Americans, so their parents really didn't want them to speak Yiddish. My grandparents all spoke Yiddish. I loved the language since I was small. I grew up speaking a little bit, and I spent a lot of time in my teens really perfecting my Yiddish and working on it.
And you must have a real gift for languages to be able to speak English, these Chinese languages as well as the Asian languages as well as the Yiddish, because they're very different one from the other.
It's interesting, Maayan. You know, I taught Chinese when I was an undergrad, and I found that I was teaching like extraordinary students at Georgetown University undergrad, most of them in the School of Foreign Service. I would find that straight-A students, some of them, even more than a few, really struggled with Chinese. And ultimately, I think what it boils down to in terms of perfecting proficiency in a language is interest. Mm-hmm. If you're really interested in it, you'll do well, provided that you've got a good enough ear. But I think it really boils down to interest. I was very, very interested when I started to learn Chinese. I love Yiddish, and so I've spent a lot of time on my Yiddish, reading and other forms of education. So I think it's interest in the end.
Was the Chinese part of wanting to be involved in finance, given the role that China played in the United States, certainly at the time that you were in school?
I would like to attribute my success, particularly being a first in the position that I served, on an exceptional amount of foresight, but it really, really wasn't the case. Some people...
I don't think you're supposed to tell people that.
Yeah, I mean, some people call it happenstance. I like to refer to it as hashgacha pratis, divine providence. In my case, I started to learn Chinese really out of a requirement of my personal circumstances. I went out to work to help our family's finances at a very young age, right after my bar mitzvah. Wow. I ended up working in a Chinese restaurant. I started out as a dishwasher.
Were you religious at the time?
I come from a traditional family, and I started in the kitchen, moved my way out to the dining room as a busboy and then later as a waiter. And I realized that when I started waiting tables, if I really wanted to do a good job and maximize my earning potential by getting good tips, I needed to get food out of the kitchen. And the only way to do that was to be able to communicate with the cooks, all of whom were Chinese speakers.
Well, that's certainly entrepreneurial and financial related in some capacity. So you did that, and then you went on to, I guess, become, somebody who in the financial industry. When did you make the flip from learning linguistics and things of that nature to wanting to be in business?
It happened in college. It's kind of interesting. You talk to folks these days, and they go for one degree and a second degree, and they do a double major, and then they do a master's. And I end up asking people, like, who are still in college and university programs in their 30s, what do they want to be when they grow up? Mm-hmm. In my time, I and a lot of my fellow classmates were very focused on the future. I wanted to find a way that I could combine my passion in Asian culture with some functional expertise that would lead to a progression or a path in a profession. So when I was in my junior year at college, I had a conversation with my then mentor, Professor Thomas Robinson. It was a pretty quick conversation. I said, Professor Robinson, I need some direction. His first question to me was, do you want to be a doctor? I said, well, gee, I'm not pre-med, not really good with blood. So he said, okay, do you want to become a dentist? I said, well, gee, Professor, same answer. And he said, okay, you're going to law school. And so that's basically what happened. And it's been an extraordinary run because I found that the law is for me. I enjoy solving problems, really big, complex, multidimensional problems, and I enjoy helping people.
Wow, that's a great answer. Now, I was reading up about you, to try to learn more. You've got your new book coming out, obviously, Seat at the Table, which is what I really want to get into and talk about. But there were a couple of interesting anecdotes in some of the things that I read that I just needed to ask you about. The first one is I read that you helped save a rabbi from food poisoning while in China. Can you just share that story?
So I was in Beijing, 86, 87, right after I finished my JD. I was sent over as one of 10 fellowship recipients from the U.S. government, National Academy of Sciences. There were 1,000 applicants in my year. 10 were chosen. I was the only one chosen in law. And I wanted to really use the experience to better my Chinese, have experience in the mainland, learn Chinese law in China. But I also wanted to leverage the time to be able to explore the mystique and all of the back roads of China. And so whenever possible, a couple of friends and I would take trips. And one place that I really wanted to go to was Kaifeng, which was the capital of China, capital of China during the Song Dynasty. It's in Henan province. Mm-hmm. And Kaifeng was really the easternmost point in the Silk Road. It was very important in international trade in its day. As such, since it was the easternmost point, Silk Road obviously started in the west, where traders would bring products from the west and sell them in the east and vice versa. It ended up attracting a lot of Jewish traders, particularly from Persia. Oh, okay. And so there was a Jewish community that existed in Kaifeng for hundreds of years. Through intermarriage, it ended in the late Qing dynasty, let's call it the early 1900s. But I always wanted to go and explore Kaifeng to look at and explore some of the Jewish communal artifacts there. There was a shul building that the shul used to be in, and there are still some matzevas, some tombstones that exist in where the Jewish cemetery is. And so I made the trip out there, had two really, really interesting experiences. One of them was when we went to the Kaifeng Hotel to register, as we were required under law at the time as foreigners. The manager of the hotel ran out into the courtyard where the China Travel Service office that we were registering at was located and said, do any of you speak English? So we were foreigners. Yes, I speak English. We have a very ill foreigner here. Turned out the woman's name was Emily Fagenson. She was from Los Angeles. She was suffering from pretty acute food poisoning. We knew we needed to get her hydrated, get her some glucose, get her some antibiotics. Very, very long story, details of which, really highly entertaining details of which are in the book. But long story short, we got her to the kind of comparable 4077 MASH type, medic unit in the field, as it were. We got her sorted out, and she was rather delirious. When we finally got her hooked up to an IV, they wanted to transfer her to a room where she could rest, a bed. There were no chairs, no rolling beds. They just had two poles that connected a canvas, and she laid down on the floor. Two fellows picked her up. Another guy walking through the Chinese alleys from the office to the room where she was going to be staying, holding an umbrella over her because it was raining. And she came to and grabbed me and said, "Please," it turns out she was a Reform rabbi, "please go back to my hotel room."
I was like, where's the rabbi come in?
Yeah, "please go back to my hotel room and get me my tefillin because I don't know if I'm going to make it and I want to say the Shema."
Oh my goodness, what a story.
But the other even more entertaining incident occurred when we finally found the neighborhood where the Jewish community resided. There was one remaining, the last granddaughter of the last halachic Jewish man, Chinese Jewish man, who lived. He passed away in the early 1900s, about the 19-teens. So somebody told us that his granddaughter was standing in the square that we were at, and I walked up to her and tried to engage her in Chinese. This was in the late 80s, call it 1986. When the Communist Party still very, very heavily controlled all activity and all contact with foreigners, to the point where local folks would not want to unnecessarily entangle themselves in trouble with the party. So despite my efforts, she almost refused to engage. I kind of got a word or two out of her. It was nice to at least have seen her. I felt that at least we accomplished that. Went back to Beijing. Couple days later, I traveled to Hong Kong. There was not a shul in Beijing at the time, and because it was Rosh Hashanah.
Oh, gosh.
And I finally put two and two together, and I figured it out. I think that she was upset because we didn't bring her a bottle of Manischewitz for Rosh Hashanah.
That's not the answer I was expecting. So I do want to jump over to your time, working in the Treasury. Now, you called Trump's trade policy chess while others played checkers. So explain why you say that, and what was it like being one of the few people that was sitting around the table helping him move those pieces around?
Maybe I'll break that out a little bit to Trump 45 and Trump 47,
okay,
and take the analogy that you've drawn from what I've said and repoint a little bit.
Okay.
And my repointing is that in order to kind of be responsive, is that I believe the president is not just playing chess, but he's playing 3D chess. Okay. The president is a strategic genius. He sees far, far in front of him. And we did, I believe, a good job on the trade front during Trump 45. The accomplishment that I'm proudest of was the Phase 1 trade agreement with China, because I had been working in China for 30 years prior to joining Treasury. Mm-hmm. I had been assisting all of clients in my big law practice for 30 years, try to address the issues that the president was trying to pursue and champion for the betterment of our country and the U.S. people. And we were never able really to get them to the table, as it were. Whereas the president used a rather large leverage point in the form of tariffs to get the Chinese to come to the table, and ultimately we settled a deal with them that didn't completely erase the whole of the deficit, but put a good a target on putting a good dent into it, as well as dealing with all of the other key major issues: intellectual property, cyber issues, predatory international development finance practices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if we were to fast forward to Trump 47 to really provide an illustration of the 3D chess, I believe it's brilliant what the president has done. He came out of the corner punching on day one, literally day one, leveraging his executive authority to impose tariffs all over the place. A lot of folks will argue that tariffs are not good for the economy. The numbers, I think, show otherwise. Not all of the numbers, but a lot of the numbers. But one can only look at numbers at a particular point in time. I'm wholly confident that we will see benefits economically that will come in the mid and the long term. But the game that the president played was to come out of the corner swinging really hard with some very significant tariffs. And where we've ended up in around a half a year, between 3 to 6 months, is that he has cut deals with just around 10 countries that represent roughly 70-odd% of the trade deficit, while at the same time securing direct investment into the United States from those countries and purchases of U.S. energy for those countries, which means to say that he's assisting in onshoring manufacturing and helping build our industrial base, and therefore also as a byproduct of that helping unemployment numbers, labor numbers, while at the same time pursuing his energy dominance policy. And so 3D chess really refers to that whole process, bringing that first group of countries in, clearing the way so that we could focus our important resources on cracking the biggest trade nut, which is obviously China, which represents the biggest piece of that remaining 20-odd% of the deficit.
And you think he has something in place that's going to solve this before the end of his term?
I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. The folks that are working on that used to work under me or were colleagues of mine, and they're very, very talented people. And from what we are reading in the press, there's every indication that they're focusing on the right issues. It's a little bit more complicated now, Maayan, because critical minerals are in the mix now, and the Chinese are using those to leverage. Semiconductors are in the mix. But our team is doing a great job. We've got good people at Treasury. Jameson Greer, who used to work under Ambassador Lighthizer at USTR, is heading USTR. We've got great folks at Commerce, and I have every confidence in them.
You didn't want to go back to the White House this time around?
I'm a little bit busy at the moment in my present position. I've got a couple of big things cooking. I thoroughly enjoyed my time at Treasury. I feel it was the best job that I ever had, but I'm very committed to doing what I'm presently doing. And
something you can't share?
Well, I'm the group general counsel of a very large investment platform. We've got one really big transaction on now that I'm looking after, and I'm thoroughly excited about that.
Got it. You're in that. So, you did, sit in your role, though, at a pretty difficult time, certainly for the U.S. economy and really for the world, because it was during the pandemic. We all know what happened to travel and tourism during that time, and you were really the one that led, from what I understand, the $94 billion airline rescue plan. So tell us, what was the most human moment that you remember from that process? I mean, how did you come up with the plan, and what was going through your head? Because this was like a lot of jobs, an entire market, really, and it was impacting the world.
Yeah. I have to say, Maayan, that it was an extraordinarily challenging 9 months of my life, simply because of the enormity of the job.
Yeah.
And so if we were to break out enormity, there's the enormity of the lives that were depending on the relief. 700,000 aviation workers, give or take. Multiply that out by 3 for the average family size,
right,
and you get a percentage of the U.S. population, right? Enormity of the task, meaning that they're like a bunch of like really big airlines, call it a group from like 7 to 13, and then there are a lot of like really small guys, all of whom are relying on the relief, but at the same time have very, very different needs, the solutions for which were very, very different. And we were very, very bootstrapped in who we had in the building and who we could rely on. And remember, there was no infrastructure. There was no federal aviation bank in existence. There was no documentation. There was no structure. There were no payment system. There were no anti-fraud systems. There were no nothing. We had an application that came in, for example, just as an example, thousands of applications came in from an applicant in the Middle East applying for $1 billion loan, which we knew, off the bat was fraud, but we didn't have systems in place. We didn't have people. And it was through in my book, I refer to my 4 Ps, one of which is perseverance, another of which is hashgacha, providence. And in my law career, I had handled at the time the largest restructuring in Asia ever that implicated billions and billions of dollars that was needed to be sorted in a very critical time period. If not, the enterprise would have failed, and the failure of that enterprise would have sent shockwaves through the Chinese financial markets, which in turn would have then had an effect on the Asian financial markets, and then in turn globally. That was a matter that went on for 2 years, nonstop, highly complex, a lot of moving parts, a lot of people, a lot of paper, and it was through the skills that I had acquired on that matter and others that really helped me through.
Now, you mentioned your 4 Ps, but you only mentioned 2 of them. So what are the rest of the 4 Ps? And what was the hardest one to uphold when you were working in Washington?
Well, I've just referred to perseverance, and that's not a hard one. One just puts their head down and moves along. Mm-hmm. I've mentioned divine providence, which is a little bit out of my control, right? Yeah. Progress over perfection is a rule that I've tended to follow for my whole career, simply because I found that the people that get too buried in the details just never end up getting anywhere. Yep. The one that is certainly, I think, my favorite is personal touch. I found that, specifically referring to your question on Washington, that the degree to which I was able to achieve any level of success, any degree of success, it was really because I worked hard at creating personal bonds with the people that are across the table from me. I worked with 30-plus countries in Latin America on a bunch of initiatives. I represented the United States as head of delegation to meetings at the Financial Stability Board, which are a group of G20-plus ministers of finance and central bankers, like pretty high pressure. I worked with a couple dozen countries in Asia. I did a fair bit of work in the Middle East here. And uniformly, what I found was that sitting at a table, reading talkers, engaging in constructive dialogue, quote unquote, is like one thing. But if you want to get something done, you kind of got to sit down with folks and hash out issues, understand what common ground is and where the challenges and kind of conflicts are, and then come up with ways to address those conflicts. And the best way that I found to do that was through understanding who was on the other side of the table and engaging with them, hopefully, if geographic circumstances allowed, over my dining table in Kellerem. I bought a house in Washington. There are very, very limited places where one can entertain kosher. And so I decided to create my own environment in my house, which I jokingly referred to as Palazzo Seta, the Silk Palace. Give it a little bit of Italian aura. And I cooked up very nice Chinese kosher food, anything kosher, served some very nice Israeli wine, and as people will read in the book, got a lot done over the table.
Did you ever? Well, first of all, who cooked? You had like a personal chef, your wife.
So my wife is an exceptional cook.
Okay.
And she was for most of the time, except during COVID, residing at our home in Borough Park because we have 3 young kids who were in schools, and we felt we really couldn't supplant them. So I would travel every week to Washington on Sunday, go home on Thursday for Shabbos. I would work Friday at home when I wasn't traveling. During COVID, the one blessing of COVID was that I got to be with my family under the same roof for 3 months straight. But through my restaurant and other work, I picked up. I'm a pretty mean cook. I do really well in the kitchen. So
you were cooking for the diplomats?
I was not only cooking. I would run out of the building at like 5. Some I would do the night before, and I would shop and I would prep and I would cook and I would serve and I would clean after they left.
It's crazy. If only people knew that. I'm assuming a seat at the table is going to explain this to us in the book.
Everybody knew that. You're absolutely correct. Everybody knew that, and a couple of my staff, the really dedicated career professionals, used to always comment how they just did not understand how I could pull off these 4-course dinners and
they
still
aren't used to Shabbat,
Yeah, absolutely.
But tell me about some of the this dinner table diplomacy. Can you share, I don't want us to run out of time, but share a story with me of something that was really successful because of this dinner party.
Well, there are two examples that I give. One with the Panamanians, where we solved a really, really big problem for them financially for their state-owned energy utility. The engagement got off to a really, really rocky start. I was very convicted to the solution that I had for them. They didn't really see it up front, and it wasn't until the third bottle of wine and maybe second bottle of vodka.
How many bottles of wine did you take? That's so funny.
Everybody from the Panamanian delegation used to love to come over, and we had a really exceptional engagement with them. And it's not only important for Panama and for U.S.-Panama relations, but Panama is a relatively small country, but geopolitically, strategically, it's very, very important. But I think really the biggest win was with Vietnam. I had a very, very large infrastructure finance engagement with Vietnam. It took a little bit of time to penetrate, as was the case with every country. It wasn't an easy program, very impactful, but kind of complicated, a lot of details. And I remember that on my first trip to Vietnam of probably 4, I had a meeting with the then most senior finance official, who was the most senior economic policymaker within the Vietnamese Communist Party. The first meeting was very tense because Treasury had just labeled Vietnam as a currency manipulator. Chairman Bin, who is the official's name, was not too pleased with it, so he kind of hauled me in. I thought we were going to talk infrastructure finance. I didn't think that I was going to get a talking to, which I did in front of our embassy staff. We did fine in the meeting. But on his next trip to the United States, I invited him to my house. He brought a delegation of over 15 officials. I brought some of our officials, and I brought 3 Orthodox, one of whom is Hasidic, very successful, 2 of whom are Hasidic, very successful businessmen, to join the dinner party to speak about how we conduct business, and particularly how we dedicate parts of our profits to charity and communal commitment. We served the chairman galareta, pcha. We served him herring. I served him some really great chicken, a lot of Jewish delicacies, a lot of very nice Israeli wine, a little bit of my home-infused vodka. And on my trip right after that, he made a dinner for me. In Vietnam. He organized a kosher meal for me.
Wow.
And the ambassador of Vietnam in Washington was so touched that as prep to those meetings, I had invited him over. And I write about this in the book. He was very insistent that he reciprocate at the embassy in Washington. And so my front office was very busy for 3 weeks helping the staff at the embassy, Vietnamese embassy in Washington, sort out how they could prepare one dish so that we could share a kosher meal. And it was lovely.
Wow, it's so wild. So we are running out of time, or we are out of time, but I just want to make sure that our viewers know about this book, A Seat at the Table, that you're talking about, where they can get more of these stories, which are super engaging and funny, and yet so impactful probably on Americans' day-to-day life in terms of the, impacts on the economy and on our relations with these foreign countries. So A Seat at the Table, I think, is going to be released next month in September. Is that right?
September 16th. It's available for pre-order on Amazon. It's being distributed by Simon & Schuster, so all of Simon & Schuster's outlets are carrying it on a bunch of different places in the internet.
Incredible. Well, Mitchell Silk, the former Assistant Secretary for International Markets at the U.S. Department of Treasury under Donald Trump in the previous administration, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you.